I want you to stop what you're doing right now. I mean it. If you're folding laundry, put it down. If you're half asleep, sit up. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of thing that will follow you into whatever room you walk into tonight. A man woke up one morning to a voicemail, 11 seconds long, from his own number. His phone was on the nightstand. He'd been asleep for hours, and when he pressed play, what came out of that speaker was his own voice, whispering something he still can't fully make out, and underneath it, in the background, a sound he recognized the moment he heard it, the creak of his front door opening. Stay with me. This story was submitted by a listener we'll call Daniel. He asked us not to use his real name, not his city, not even his state, which tells you something about where his head is even now, months after this happened. What I can tell you is this. Daniel is in his early 30s. He lives alone, has for about 4 years. He's not the kind of person who spooks easily. He works in IT, he's practical. He's the guy in the friend group who explains away everything. Probably the same guy who would hear this show and call it entertainment. He wasn't sleeping well that week. New project at work, deadlines stacking up. He'd been going to bed late, around midnight, sometimes later. The night this happened, he remembers checking his phone one last time at 12:47 a.m. No messages, nothing unusual, and setting it face down on the nightstand before he went to sleep. He woke up at 7:20 in the morning to his alarm, reached for his phone, and saw the notification. One missed call, one voicemail, received at 3:04 a.m. from his own number. His first thought was spoofing. Spam callers do it. They hijack a number, make it look like the call is coming from you. He'd seen it before. He almost deleted the voicemail without listening to it. Almost. He pressed play. The first 2 seconds were silence. Not static, silence. The kind that feels like someone holding their breath on the other end. Then breathing, slow, close to the microphone, and then a voice, his voice, whispering. He says he could only make out a few words clearly. He's listened to it dozens of times trying to parse the rest. The words he caught were, don't, a pause, it's already, and then something that might have been his own name, and then the background sound, a slow, low creak, the exact creak his front door makes. He knows that sound the way you know your own heartbeat. Old building, old hinges, a specific pitch that's different from every other door in the apartment. It was unmistakable. Now here's what I need you to sit with for a second. His phone was in his hand. His phone made a call. His voice is in the recording. Either Daniel made that call in his sleep, walked to the front door, opened it, whispered into his phone, and remembered none of it. Or something else used his phone to make that call. Something that knew his voice. Something that was standing at his door. Neither answer is okay. Daniel is a practical man, so he did practical things. He checked his door. It was locked. Deadbolt, chain, everything exactly as he'd left it. He checked his call history. One outgoing call, 3:04 a.m., 11 seconds, to himself. He checked his phone's screen time data to see if the phone had been unlocked. It had, at 3:04 a.m. for 14 seconds. He told himself he must have done it in his sleep. Stress does strange things to people. Sleep deprivation, work pressure. He'd read about people sending emails in their sleep, having full conversations. This wasn't impossible. He talked himself down over coffee and went to work. He didn't listen to the voicemail again that day, but he didn't delete it either. That night he set up his laptop camera pointed at the bedroom door. Not a security camera, just his laptop, FaceTime with himself, set to record. If he was sleepwalking, he'd have proof. In the morning he checked the footage. He hadn't moved. 8 hours of him sleeping in bed, completely still. He never got up. His phone never left the nightstand. He watched the whole thing twice to be sure. And then he noticed something he hadn't been looking for. At 3:04 a.m., the exact timestamp of the voicemail, the bedroom door moved. Not opened, not slammed. Moved. Shifted slightly, the way a door shifts when there's a pressure change in a room. The way a door moves when something passes through the space it occupies. He was in bed. His phone was on the nightstand. The door moved, and 11 seconds of his own voice, whispering, afraid, was recorded and sent to him from the other side of it. Whatever was in that apartment at 3:04 in the morning, It wanted him to know it was there. Daniel had the apartment checked for gas leaks. Nothing. He asked the building manager about the unit's history in the most casual way he could manage. The manager mentioned, almost as an aside, that the previous tenant had moved out suddenly, didn't finish the lease, left some things behind, didn't leave a forwarding address. He moved out 22 days after the voicemail. The recording was automatically deleted by his carrier after 30 days. He's never gotten another call from his own number, but he told us, and this is the part that stays with me, he said that even now, in a new apartment, in a different city, he still turns his phone face down before he goes to sleep because he doesn't want to see the screen light up at 3 a.m. He doesn't want to see who's calling. Daniel never found out what made that call, but in the next story there was a witness, someone who was awake, alert, and paying attention from the very first night, someone who couldn't speak, couldn't explain what they were sensing, but made it absolutely clear that something was wrong. The problem is, no one listened until it was almost too late. Dogs don't lie. That's the thing I keep coming back to with this story. They don't gaslight you. They don't rationalize. They don't talk themselves out of what they know. When a dog is afraid, it's afraid. When a dog senses something wrong, something is wrong. So when Marcus set up a camera to find out what his dog was reacting to in that hallway, and the footage came back showing his dog staring directly into the lens at 2:47 in the morning, motionless, for 6 straight minutes. The question isn't what the dog was doing. The question is what was standing between her and the camera, in the dark, that she wouldn't go near. Marcus submitted this story about 8 months ago. He lives in Western Pennsylvania, smaller city, second-floor apartment in an older building, the kind with thick walls and narrow hallways and radiators that knock in the night. He'd moved in with his dog, Halo, in early spring. Halo is a 4-year-old German Shepherd he's had since she was 8 weeks old. He raised her, trained her. They've lived in 3 different places together, and she has never once shown anxiety about a new space. First night somewhere new, she finds her spot. She circles twice. She's down. That's always been her pattern. Not this time. The moment they crossed the threshold of that apartment, Halo stopped walking, stood in the living room, stared down the hallway toward the bedroom, and would not move forward. Marcus figured it was the smell. Old building, new smells, maybe a previous pet. He carried her food bowl to the bedroom to encourage her. She got to the edge of the hallway and sat down, ears up, eyes fixed, absolutely still. He slept on the couch that first night so she wouldn't be alone. By day 3, Marcus had a routine. He'd go to bed. Halo would follow him to the edge of the hallway, sit and stare until he came back out. She never whined, never barked, just watched. Whatever she was tracking, it wasn't making noise, it wasn't moving. It was just there, in that hallway, in a way that only she could perceive. He had the building's super cum look. Nothing unusual, no pests, no mold, no structural issues visible. The super mentioned vaguely that the last tenant had been an older man, quiet, no complaints, hadn't said much when he moved out. Marcus nodded and let it go, but he started noticing other things, small things. The temperature in the hallway was always slightly lower than the rest of the apartment, even with the heat on. His cat, he hadn't mentioned the cat before, a 7-year-old tabby named Rook who had never cared about anything in her life, began sleeping exclusively in the kitchen as far from the hallway as possible. 2 animals, same response, same invisible boundary. At this point, Marcus had 2 choices. He could accept that something about that hallway, something real, maybe environmental, maybe something in the walls, was disturbing both his animals. Or he could put a camera in there and find out what they were reacting to at night when he was asleep. He chose the camera. He really should have chosen moving out. The first 3 nights of footage were unremarkable. Halo would come to the edge of the hallway between 11 p.m. and midnight, sit for anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour, then return to the couch. Nothing triggered it visibly. No sounds on the audio. No movement. Marcus was relieved. Whatever it was subtle. Probably something he could fix. An ultrasonic frequency from old pipes. Something in the walls the animals were picking up that he couldn't. There was an explanation. He just needed more data. He almost stopped watching the footage. Night 7. 2:47 a.m. Halo got up from the couch, walked to the hallway, and stopped at the edge as usual. But this time she didn't sit. She stood. And then she turned her head, slowly, like she was tracking something moving toward her, and looked directly at the camera. And she didn't look away. 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Standing completely still. Not a single shift in weight. Not a blink Marcus could make out on the footage. Just his dog staring into the lens, with every muscle in her body rigid, with her ears pinned back in the way they only go when she is genuinely, deeply afraid. Something was in that hallway with her, between her and the camera. And whatever it was, she was not going to look away from it. Marcus watched that clip 4 times before he understood what he was seeing. The camera was at the far end of the hallway. Halo was at the near end. She was looking at the camera, which means she was looking at something in the space between them. 7, maybe 8 feet of dark hallway. Nothing visible on the footage. Nothing the camera could see. But Halo could see it, and she was terrified. Marcus had the apartment tested for everything he could think of. Carbon monoxide, radon, EMF levels, infrasound frequencies that can cause anxiety in animals. Every test came back clean. He asked the landlord directly about the previous tenant. The landlord paused, looked away, said he didn't really have records going back that far. Marcus asked how far back. The landlord said he'd have to check and never followed up. Marcus moved out on day 19. He gave his notice verbally, forfeited his deposit, and was gone in 2 days. Halo has not reacted to a single hallway since. Not one. 3 apartments since then. Multiple houses. She walked straight through without breaking stride. Whatever was in that space, it stayed there. The apartment is still listed as available. It has been re-rented twice in the last 8 months. Both tenants left before their leases ended. Marcus had 2 animals trying to tell him something. In the last story tonight, there were no animals, no cameras, no recordings, just a woman, a house across the street, and a light in a window that had no business being on. Because the man who lived there had been dead for 6 weeks, and whatever was running his lights had been watching her the entire time. She pulled into her driveway at 7:18 in the morning. The light in the window across the street clicked off. She'd seen it 100 times. She thought nothing of it. She was tired. She'd worked 12 hours. All she wanted was coffee and her bed. She assumed the old man across the street was an early riser, up with the dawn, turning off his lamp when the morning came in. It wasn't until 3 weeks later that she found out he'd been dead since October, and by then she'd already started counting, going back through every morning she could remember. Every single time she'd come home from the night shift, that light went off, not before she turned onto the street, not after she walked inside, when she pulled into the driveway. Whatever was in that house, it was watching for her specifically. Lynn is a night shift nurse from a small town in rural Georgia. She submitted this story with the condition that we change certain details, the street, the town, anything that could identify her. She still lives nearby. She still drives past that house. She works 3 nights a week, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., has for 6 years. She knows that drive home in the dark better than anything. The same gas station, the same blinking yellow light at the intersection, the same left turn onto her street. Exhaustion makes your eyes sharp for anything out of place, she told us. You notice things when you're running on fumes and muscle memory. She noticed the light for the first time in early November. Just a warm glow behind a curtained front window. Nothing remarkable. The man who lived there was in his 70s, retired, kept to himself. She knew him to wave to. She assumed like most people his age he was up early, and she just hadn't noticed his light before. She didn't learn he'd passed until a coworker mentioned seeing a funeral notice, a small one, in the local paper, dated mid-October, 2 weeks before Lynn first noticed the light. Lynn did what most of us would do. She told herself it was a family member, someone staying at the house while the estate was sorted, a relative she'd never met, keeping their own odd hours. It was a reasonable explanation, and she repeated it to herself for about a week before she started actually paying attention. The light was always already on when she left at 6:45 p.m. It was always off within minutes of her arriving home, between 7 and 7:30 a.m. She started noticing on nights she came home slightly later, 7:45, once even 8:15, when she'd stayed for a handoff. The light was still on, waiting, and then it went off when she pulled in. She started noticing on her nights off too. She'd look out the window around 7 a.m. The light would go off anyway, at roughly the same time, even when she wasn't coming home. As if it had learned her schedule so well, it was running it on its own. She told herself it was a timer, set by a family member to deter break-ins. Perfectly reasonable. She almost believed it. And then one night in December, she got off work 2 hours early. A slow night, overstaffed. They sent her home at 5 a.m. She drove the usual route, turned onto her street, and the light went off as she pulled into her driveway. An hour and a half before it was supposed to. Right on time for her. Lynn went inside and sat at her kitchen table for a long time. Then she did something she'd been putting off for weeks. She walked across the street in the dark at 5:15 in the morning and knocked on the door. Nothing. She peered through the window beside the door, curtained, but with a small gap at the edge. The living room was dark, no lamp, no furniture she could make out. She couldn't tell if the lamp had been in the window or somewhere further back in the room. She went home. She told herself the timer had a sensor, a light sensor that triggered based on ambient light levels outside, and that was why it corresponded with her arrival, the headlights of her car changing the light level in the room. She found this explanation online and held on to it like a life raft. She called the non-emergency police line and reported what she'd seen. Not the timing, not the pattern, just that she'd noticed lights in a vacant property and wanted someone to check it out. 2 officers did a walkthrough the next afternoon. They called her back an hour later. The house was empty, completely cleared out, looked like it had been for months. No furniture, no personal effects, no signs of anyone staying there, and no lamp, in any room, in any socket. She went over that in her mind for days. No lamp, not a timer, not a sensor, not a family member, no lamp in the socket, nothing that could have produced that light. And yet she had seen it, warm, consistent, in that front window, for months. Her neighbors had seen it too, she found out later, though none of them had thought much of it. A light with no source, in a house with no one inside, turning off every morning when she came home. Lynn watched that house for another 6 weeks. The light never came on again. Whatever presence had occupied that space, whatever had been running those lights, keeping her schedule, watching for her headlights, it was gone, or it had moved on, or it had simply stopped wanting her to know it was there. She's asked around carefully about the man who lived there. She's learned almost nothing. He was private, had no local family. No one she's spoken to knew much about his life before he came to that town. She doesn't know what he left behind when he died. She still drives past the house every single morning on her way home from work. She told us she can't stop looking at that window, and she told us something else, something she said she hadn't told anyone else. Some mornings, in the gray early light, before she's fully awake, she still thinks she sees it. Just for a second, just a flicker. That warm yellow glow behind the curtain, going out as she turns into her driveway. She says she's probably imagining it. She doesn't sound like she believes that. 3 people. 3 things they cannot explain. A voicemail from a number that shouldn't have called. A dog that knew what the camera couldn't see. A light in the window of a dead man's house that knew exactly when to turn off. If you've experienced something you can't account for, something that doesn't fit into any explanation you've tried, you know where to find us. We're always here in the darkened corner, waiting.